It is only after one is in trouble that one realizes how little sympathy and kindness there are in the world. While I live, I hope. I have never written a word that did not come from my heart. I never shall. I was too impatient to work at the usual duties assigned women on newspapers. I always had a desire to know asylum life more thoroughly, a desire to be convinced that the most helpless of God's creatures, the insane, were cared for kindly and properly. A stick beats more ugliness into a person than it ever beats out. I always made a point of telling the doctors I was sane, and asking to be released, but the more I endeavored to assure them of my sanity, the more they doubted it. I had looked forward so eagerly to leaving the horrible place, yet when my release came and I knew that God's sunlight was to be free for me again, there was a certain pain in leaving. I had never been near insane persons before in my life, and had not the faintest idea of what their actions were like. That was the greatest night of my existence. For a few hours I stood face to face with self. The turned-down pages of my life were turned up, and the past was present. I took upon myself to enact the part of a poor, unfortunate crazy girl, and felt it my duty not to shirk any of the disagreeable results that should follow. I have watched patients stand and gaze longingly toward the city they in all likelihood will never enter again. It means liberty and life, it seems so near, and yet heaven is not further from hell. How can a doctor judge a woman's sanity by merely bidding her good morning and refusing to hear her pleas for release? Even the sick ones know it is useless to say anything, for the answer will be that it is their imagination. They were being driven to a prison, through no fault of their own, in all probability for life. In comparison, how much easier it would be to walk to the gallows than to this tomb of living horrors. In our short walks we passed the kitchen where food was prepared for the nurses and doctors. There we got glimpses of melons and grapes and all kinds of fruits, beautiful white bread and nice meats, and the hungry feeling would be increased tenfold. People in the world can never imagine the length of days to those in asylums. They seemed never-ending, and we welcomed any event that might give us something to think about as well as talk of. But here let me say one thing. From the moment I entered the insane ward on the island, I made no attempt to keep up the assumed rôle of insanity. Even that was all consumed after 2 days, and the patients had to try to choke down fresh fish, just boiled in water, without salt, pepper or butter, mutton, beef, and potatoes without the faintest seasoning. I shuddered to think how completely the insane were in the power of their keepers, and how one could weep and plead for release, and all of no avail, if the keepers were so minded. But here was a woman taken without her own consent from the free world to an asylum and there given no chance to prove her sanity. Confined most probably for life behind asylum bars, without even being told in her language the why and wherefore. Compare this with a criminal, who is given every chance to prove his innocence. Who would not rather be a murderer and take the chance for life than be declared insane, without hope of escape? Compare this with a criminal, who is given every chance to prove his innocence. Who would not rather be a murderer and take the chance for life than be declared insane, without hope of escape? I always liked fog, it lends such a soft, beautifying light to things that otherwise in the broad glare of day would be rude and commonplace. I said I believed I could. I had some faith in my own ability as an actress and thought I could assume insanity long enough to accomplish any mission entrusted to me. Could I pass a week in the insane ward at Blackwell's Island? I said I could and I would. And I did. The attendants seemed to find amusement and pleasure in exciting the violent patients to do their worst. But here let me say one thing. From the moment I entered the insane ward on the island, I made no attempt to keep up the assumed role of insanity. I talked and acted just as I do in ordinary life. Yet strange to say, the more sanely I talked and acted, the crazier I was thought to be by all except one physician, whose kindness and gentle ways I shall not soon forget. A pretty young Hebrew woman spoke so little English I could not get her story except as told by the nurses. They said her name is Sarah Fishbaum, and that her husband put her in the asylum because she had a fondness for other men than himself. Elizabeth Cochrane Seaman, born Elizabeth Jane Cochrane, May 5, 1864 to January 27, 1922, better known by her pen name Nelliebly, in Cochrane's Mills, now part of Burrell Township, Armstrong County, Pennsylvania. Her father, Michael Cochrane, born about 1810, started out as a laborer and mill worker before buying the local mill and most of the land surrounding his family farmhouse. He later became a merchant, postmaster, and associate justice at Cochrane's Mills, which was named after him, in Pennsylvania. Michael married twice. He had 10 children with his first wife, Catherine Murphy, and 5 more children, including Elizabeth Cochrane, his 13th daughter, with his second wife, Mary Jane Kennedy. Michael Cochrane died in 1870, when Elizabeth was 6. As a young girl, Elizabeth often was called Pink, because she so frequently wore that color. As she became a teenager, she wanted to portray herself as more sophisticated, and she dropped the nickname and changed her surname to Cochrane. In 1879, she enrolled at Indiana Normal School, now Indiana University of Pennsylvania, for 1 term but was forced to drop out due to lack of funds. In 1880, Cochrane's mother moved her family to Allegheny City, which was later annexed by the city of Pittsburgh. Nellie Bly was an American journalist who was widely known for her record-breaking trip around the world in 72 days in emulation of Jules Verne's fictional character Phileas Fogg, and an exposé in which she worked undercover to report on a mental institution from within. She was a pioneer in her field and launched a new kind of investigative journalism.